Well, thank you to everyone who could attend today. And for those who are going to be watching the recording later, you are now officially in organic chemistry. No, I know, cheesy joke. Maybe we could say calculus 3. No, I know that incites fear in a lot of people, and we're not going to be talking about those things today. We're going to be talking about, are you leading or managing, with Jared Riter from Off Square One. And Jared, if you could go to the next slide so we could start off with our oath. I, Tiffany Joy Green, do solemnly swear to accept the lifelong obligation to hone my superhero powers and apply those superhero powers to the good of the people I serve. I will promote and add to the ongoing success of Empower People, its members, and the people, organizations, and communities it serves. I will help prepare the next generation of superheroes. I am driven to be a positive change agent for those I serve and interact with. And I encourage everybody to take 5 seconds right now, put your hands on your hips, look up like you're a superhero, and it will change the course of the rest of your day, because you will, in fact, feel like a superhero. Jared, I don't see those hands on the hips. Thank you. And now I pass the baton on to Jared.
I didn't bring the cape with me. That was the one prop you told me not to bring.
That is going to be part of Empower People merch. You can count on it.
Empower People merch. I love it. Well, hey everyone. Good afternoon, or if you're watching this at a later date, good to see you. But today we're going to talk about, are you leading or are you managing, or vice versa. We're going to just start with some quick learning outcomes, just to give you a sense and the lay of the land of what today is going to look like. So high level, real quick, looking to talk about the fundamental differences between managing and leading. How do you identify if you're leading or you're managing? And then what are some of those essential qualities? And then ideally, we'll talk about, how do you implement this, right? We want to lead with being able to do something with the stuff we've talked about today. And hopefully everything that I've put together, you're able to go back and figure out, how do you actually apply it and try it out, test it on for size, and find opportunities to implement it, hopefully in low stakes environments to start, and then getting into opportunities where it can really make some big differences. So feel free to hop in with any questions along the way. Happy to answer those, but we'll dive right in. So real quick, first, I'm gonna just introduce myself. Co-founder and senior consultant for Off Square One. We're a management consulting firm, and I think the thing that, if I were to say there's one thing that we love doing, it's really making that positive impact and that difference when it comes to offsites, workshops, and retreats for our clients. And typically these are just really unique experiences that are fostering environments where anything is, every idea is on the table. There's no limit. Maybe going back to Empower People and the idea of superheroes is like, everyone should feel like they're a superhero in the room with us when we're doing workshops, offsites, and retreats. They can accomplish anything, and they can also be vulnerable in those situations to help themselves develop and their teams develop at the same time. I think the leadership and the management perspective, like what gives me any sort of qualification to talk about this, and I'll put the disclaimer out there that I think there's other opinions out here on this, and that's fine. You have to identify what's that strategy that best fits for you. But went to University of Richmond for a certificate in communication and leadership. I also took their MBA program, mini MBA program, excuse me, that really helps equip me to utilize some of these skills with our clients and with you all here today. And then I think lastly, bottom right corner, don't tell Walter and Blake, my two dogs, that I'm using their name and likeness. I can't afford the copyright fees that they would be charging me, but I do have two dogs here at home. You may see them, you may hear them in the background, so I apologize. So are you leading or are you managing? And we're gonna do a little bit of introspection, some self-awareness assessment to get us started. And then we're going to go into, why is it valuable to lead? How to identify if you're leading or managing? And then what are some strategies to be a leader or manager? That last one there is hopefully things that you can take home, the little nuggets to figure out, how do you want to apply this in your day-to-day? It could be minutes after, it could be hours, it could be days after we get off this call here. So the first thing we're going to start with is a self-assessment. I have, I think, 5 questions here. that we're going to go through. I'm going to take a minute. I'll read each of these. We'll go through each of the questions, or we'll go through all 5 of the questions, and then we're going to flip back and take a couple minutes to talk about each of these. So this first one here, if you have a pen or paper, I think this is a good opportunity to jot it down. If you're watching this later on, make sure to save these or jot them down as well. I think these are things that don't have to just live here today, but rather it should be used continuously over time to take that gut check, that self-awareness test of where am I at today and where do I want to be? So the first one, how do you rate your exemplification of leadership skills? 1 is the lowest, right? I don't think that I have any leadership skills, and then 5 is going to be our strongest. I have strong leadership skills, and I'm always seeking ways to apply them and improve them. So take a moment to think about where do you fall in that category? Question number 2, how often do you communicate your organization's vision and goals to your team? Again, number 1 is going to be the lowest. I'm not sure what our vision or goals are. If you're not sure what your vision or goals are, you're in the right place. We'd love to talk more about that along the way. And then number 5, we meet to review goals on a regular cadence, and there's co-creation used to help build them. Everyone's involved to make it happen. Maybe it's somewhere in between. For question number 3, do you feel comfortable delegating tasks and empowering your team members? Strongly disagree, only to strongly agree. Question number 4, are you comfortable with handling conflict or disagreements within your team? This is the fun one. We'll talk about this a little bit more. I have a resource for you too, but strongly disagree or strongly agree or somewhere in between, 1 through 5 again. And then question 5, are you more focused on the day-to-day tasks or long-term strategic planning? 3 options here, day-to-day tasks, long-term strategic planning, a little bit of mix of both. All right, so lucky for everyone here, there's no right or wrong answer. And in this moment, it's truly a self-assessment, right? Like this is meant to be the opportunity for you to say, like, where do you feel like you're at today? And then decide like, where do you want to go? Like, right, what do you want to be able to accomplish when it comes to being able to be a stronger leader along the way? So this first one here, why I ask each of these, how do you rate your skills? I think it just goes back to why do we do self-assessments? Why do we do those moments of introspection? We want to take an opportunity to take a step back and say, where are we at? And how do we actually feel about that? Are we happy with it? Are we disappointed in our skills? Do we feel like we keep trying to improve our skills, but it's not getting better? I think those are all good questions to ask ourselves and then decide where do we fall and what does that look like? Next one there, how do you communicate organization's vision and goals with your team? We're going to talk about this a little bit more in a few minutes, but the idea of being able to really communicate out the goals, get folks who bought into how do the goals get created, how does the vision get created for an organization, for a team, can be a great way to co-create and build that buy-in, both for yourself and then for the rest of your team, ultimately being more efficient and effective along the way. You feel comfortable delegating tasks and empowering your team members. I could probably tell you 30 different stories about times where I've seen folks, and probably even myself included, where there's somebody in a leadership role that is not willing to pass off any of the responsibility to a team member that's fully capable of it and really has the time and the capacity to do it, when that leader should be spending time on something different, right? Think strategic planning or supporting another project somewhere. And some of that can come down to the idea of lack of trust, and maybe like, why isn't there trust in that environment? Or they don't know how to communicate what it is they're asking that person to do. It could certainly be a mix of those. It could be something different, but the more comfortable we are with passing off tasks and giving that trust to somebody, and then being able to help them succeed along the way with it, I think the better off we're going to be. And then conflict. Love the conflict one. The resource I have here, and if you haven't read it, is Crucial Conversations. It's a great book on just how to approach tough situations without creating added conflict and hopefully actually like just cooling the air when you go to have those conversations, making them objective and solution oriented along the way. This is one that takes years to master. I feel like I'm constantly trying to figure out how to be better when it comes to managing conflict and disagreements and getting to a resolution that is successful every time, especially when it's high stakes environments where there's a lot of emotions, there's a lot on the table, and everyone has an opinion along the way. And then the last one here, are you focused on that day-to-day tasks or those long-term strategic plans? Again, no right answer here. It's probably just kind of where you're at, right? Is your role to really focus a lot on the day-to-day tasks? Is it, I want to focus on the strategic planning? Is it a mix of both? A lot of times it probably is a mix of both. Sometimes I'll use business owners as an example. We work with a lot of small business owners that just have a handful of employees, and they get to a spot where they're like, man, I've just spent like all of my time for the last month just doing day-to-day like administrative tasks. Like I haven't got to like take a step back and look at the business and figure out what do I do? Like what do I want to do in 5 years? Like where do I want the business to be? Where do I want the business to be in 6 months from now? And the more we can recognize when we are in those day-to-day tasks versus in those moments of that long-term strategic planning, the better off, right? It's okay to be in one or the other. We just need to know where we're at. So I want to start to dive into how do we identify if you're managing or if you're leading. I'm going to start with some characteristics. And I know we have a handful of folks here on the call, and if you're watching this later on, feel free to start to jot some ideas down. But I want to start to think about what are some characteristics of a manager, and then what are some characteristics of a leader. If there's any that pop in the chat, like that's great. I'll flip ahead here in a minute, but take a moment to write a few of these down, or pause the video if you're watching it later, and we'll then start to talk about some different ideas. So managing and leading. Not saying this is not a comprehensive list, right? We are just getting a starting point here, throwing some things out, and I think we need to be really aware and hyper aware for ourselves, especially if we're in leadership roles and different leadership roles, or we're a business owner. What are the characteristics of managing? What are those characteristics of leading? And how do we flow between the two? I'm not saying that, and I probably should have said this up front, is it is important. There's going to be a time and place to manage, and there's a time and place to lead. And having the skill set of both is essential. And I think often it can be easy to fall into just being a manager and going through those motions. And we have to really think about how do we take the next step and be intentional about building those leadership skills and make sure that those are getting infused into our own day-to-day and also for our teams. So the characteristic side, I threw 3 down here. We're fixated on the day-to-day, really prescriptive processes, measuring against and enforcing activities to the prescribed standards, right? Like these are all things that you're really focused on the day-to-day activities. I think that's really what I drive home here is I tend to see folks who are much more management centric and driven are really fixated on just the goals and the day-to-day tasks. And it's like, what do I have to get done to meet this goal? What are those activities and what does that look like? What's the path forward? And what do I have to do to make it happen? Then we start to get into the leading side. And I have stuff over here that's probably more focused on how are we inspiring others? How are we bringing people along? We know the goal, but how are we really making that goal part of the team and getting the team bought into it? Delegating ownership and responsibility, creating an environment for employees to grow and flex those creative muscles. I like the last one the best, but I'm probably a little biased because that is what Oscar One likes to focus on. It's like, how do we really create those environments, whether that is in the day-to-day activities or it's in the workshops, in the retreats, the more unique experiences. But ultimately, from like the leadership side, we start to think about what are the ways that we can bring people along, and it's no longer just focused on the task A, getting to task B, and then to task C, but rather it's how do we make this effective and blow it out of the water every time. And people are excited to do it. I think that's a key piece, is how do you get others bought in to helping make that happen along the way. Next one I want to jump into is like more the scenario side. We talked about like the characteristics of managing versus leading. I want to talk about some of those scenarios. Again, take a couple moments here to jot down any scenarios that initially come to mind. Maybe they're close to home. They're things that you think about on a daily or regular basis when it comes to managing or leading. But we'll jump into some different scenarios too. So from the managing side, regular check-ins are the first thing that comes to mind, right? That Monday morning check-in, 9 a.m. Everyone gets on the call, gives your status update for the week. What are you going to do? Yada, yada, yada. Maybe it's the weekend report, right? Like Friday afternoon, or you can slam that laptop shut. You have a report you have to write every Friday to give an update to whoever. Placing an employee on a performance improvement plan. Oof. I do have a story here, and I think it's a good effective one. In a previous role, I was managing people at the time. Had a team of, I think it was about 8 that I was managing, and we had one employee that was just really struggling with even like the day-to-day tasks and moving things along. Ultimately, I had to have the conversation of like what's going on, trying to lead along the way to like help him be successful. But ultimately, I had to go down the route of we had to place on a performance improvement plan, and ultimately lead to a termination of employment because progress wasn't being made, and we're throwing every resource at him. So from a management perspective, placing someone on a performance improvement plan, not a fun experience. It certainly sucks, and that's not what you want for your people. But from a leadership perspective, I think the more you can create those opportunities, provide them those resources to hopefully get off that performance improvement plan and be successful is very important. And that was the outcome that would have loved to have seen. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. But when you can do that, you can say, well, I did everything in my power to do it, and I positioned them to be successful. But ultimately, it didn't work out. Now, from a leadership perspective, it may have been really good for that person to no longer have the role. It was a role that had a lot of autonomy, and at the same time, kind of a lot of responsibility. And it probably wasn't the right fit for that person. So putting them in a position where they can move on and find something that does better fit their skill set is really important too. For administrative tasks, multitasking during meetings. That's another one. I'm probably actually guilty of this too, is multitasking during meetings. You're not attentive, right? I think that's the biggest thing. And I don't mean for all these to be a negative, but I think this one is when you start multitasking during meetings, it just shows that, especially when you're on video, it just shows that you're not all present and they don't have your undivided attention. You're probably missing things along the way, even if you are listening in the background and typing. Leading, scheduling regular whiteboard sessions. This could go into whiteboard sessions, retreats, offsite workshops, focusing on how do you really create an environment to spark new ideas, to challenge thinking at the same time in a really positive way, and create an environment where everyone's like, I can just throw out ideas and let's see if it works. Tying goals back to the vision and mission, I think is also really essential. The more we can do that, the better we're going to be able to build that buy-in along the way. And then protecting your team's time from external distractions. I love this one. I think as both a leader and a manager, when a leader and a manager are effective here is when they start to protect their team's time from distractions. Sometimes it's other leaders are coming to that manager and saying, hey, I need you to do X, Y, and Z, or your team to do it by Friday. And you're like, hey, it's 2:00 on a Thursday. Like, that's just not going to happen. And we have other priorities and deadlines we need to hit. And being able to block and tackle for your people both shows them that you care and you respect them and their time. But it also shows that there's boundaries with others. Sure, there are extenuating circumstances where things just have to get done. But I think it's how do we make sure we identify when is it something that really has to be done by Friday at 5, or is it something that could roll over into next week? So I want to take the last little bit of time here before we get into Q&A and begin to talk about what are the strategies for being a leader. And I have 5 here. We're going to start with the accountability piece, but we'll go through all these. Now, as I put these together, these are 5 that came to mind for me that I really like, and ways that I'm constantly trying to implement my leadership skills, try to be successful with them. But this is not an all-encompassing list, right? Like there may be other opportunities out there for you, and I would encourage you to like look at some of those different resources out there on how do you implement your leadership skills along the way. Also, what does that sandbox environment look like for you? Is there a sandbox environment where you can test out things with your employees or with another colleague or a peer to say like, hey, I wanted to figure out how to give feedback, and was that effective or not? Maybe I was really mean when I said it. Maybe I didn't actually tell them the feedback. Maybe I like just kind of skirted around it the whole time. So being able to test that out is really important, because then when you do get in the moment where it matters a lot, you can be polished and ready to go. So we'll start with accountability. This one is actually my favorite. Feedback is a gift. It's probably also one of the toughest ones that I have on here is how do you actually deliver feedback? And at Offer One, we say feedback is a gift, and we try to be really conscious about giving feedback in the moment too. And we do it with the best intentions. We don't do it to tear people down, but rather we try to provide feedback as close to the moment as possible, because that's when it's fresh, and it's a good opportunity to help us and the person we're giving the feedback to be more successful quickly, right? We don't want a bad habit to continue along the way. So look for those opportunities to give feedback. I think Crucial Conversations is actually a good book, again, to reference that when it comes to how do you deliver feedback. Some of the different tactics in there help along the way, but ultimately, I think it's having that person's care and concern at front of mind and being objective with your approach, providing them with a specific example and telling them, here's what I would have done differently, or what I would see as an opportunity for growth. Establish clear expectations, always great. The more clear those expectations are, and everyone's in agreement on what the expectations are, is important. Maybe you don't love the expectations, but it's one of those things where if I can live with it and I can support it, then we should move forward with it. Communication, openness and honesty is certainly important. Want to be transparent, right? Like we want to make sure we're building trust along the way, and trust goes both ways, and it also goes a long way when done well. And we want to make sure that we're building that. Be present, like I was talking about. Like, are you on meetings and you actively listening? That really shows that you care, and that when you're present, it does make a difference. Development, invest and create opportunities. Both invest in yourself, invest in your employees, invest in your team. That can be everything from a time perspective to a dollar perspective, right? We can help each other grow and develop our skills by just spending some time each week on like some skill development internally. There's a lot of great free resources out there. We can also do that through investing from different courses, trainers, coaches, you name it. There's a lot of different skill development opportunities out there. And then you have the create opportunities. I think this goes back to like, what are the things you're doing to better challenge your team and help them be successful? I think a good example here is I guess I've been a beneficiary of it before, and I've seen others benefit from this. As the manager comes to them and says, hey, I have this project for you. I know you've never done anything like it. I'm confident that you can do it. And maybe that manager, like deep down, I don't know if he can do it, but you give them the opportunity to try and figure it out. Regardless if they succeed or if they fail, they're definitely going to learn from it, right? You can have a little retrospection at the end and ask them like, hey, what did you learn? And they're like, I had to spend my nights and weekends figuring this out because I knew nothing. And it's like, great, now you're probably an expert in this topic. Hopefully you don't have to have that experience, again with a project like this, but or it didn't work out. So, okay, well, why didn't it work? And being able to give them the opportunity to learn from it. Ultimately, that's going to boost their confidence. along the way, and show them that you believe in them and that you care. Last two here is empowerment and vision. So delegating responsibilities and authority. Again, I think that's just going back to like that trust piece. Like how are we passing off that trust to others and showing them that we trust them to be successful with the project for the team, with the goals for the team, with the vision for the team. And then encourage autonomy and innovation. The more we can get people to flex those creative muscles, the better, right? We want people to know that they're paid to think, right? You're paid to solve for problems. If again, story here is like I came to one of my managers in a previous role, and I said, hey, what do you think of this idea? Or like, how would you solve this problem? And he just responded and said, what do you think? I was like, I don't know. Like, that's why I'm coming to you. Like, and he's like, well, what did you do to solve for this problem before you ever got here? And I was like, I guess nothing. I just was like, I don't know. And he's like, exactly. So tell me what you think before I tell you what I think. Because I have an idea, but I think that you need to come up with one first. Quickly learned, right? The idea of like you're paid to think, you're paid to figure out and solve for problems, without just going and asking for the help. Ever since then, like I think about like what's the solution that I can bring to the table, and maybe somebody else has a better solution, but at least I want to start with something to say that I've thought this through enough where I can speak to my idea. Vision, communicate that vision. Being clear and articulate, I think is certainly important. Help your team and help the broader audience understand like what are you trying to accomplish and like what is the purpose of that along the way. And align your goals and objectives to the vision. I think this is a great one, especially if you truly are managing a team of folks. You probably have goals that you're setting with them for yearly basis, biannual basis. And if you can map them to those objectives and that vision and help them see how they're playing a bigger role than just within the team, but impacting the larger organization is so important. I think that's where it adds a lot of purpose to being a leader is how do you take the people that you're supporting and help them see the bigger picture that everything's bigger than the team. It probably really is, right? Like the more you can help them grow and develop and be a part of the larger organization, the more successful everybody's going to be. So I want to start to kind of wrap up here in summary a bit. And I think where I'll start is, we have the really the purpose side of what brings the power people together. And from like the purpose standpoint, it's like leaders they have the vision and the mission. A lot of times the management side, we're breaking down the elements to the job to show people how. And when we have the leadership aspect, we can elevate how we are just breaking down the elements of the job to show someone how, and taking it to maybe like the next level is what I'd call it, to take that next step and helping those people be successful. So continue to think about that as you go on, or if you're watching this again, or you are winding back through and you're looking at other areas on how you can grow as a leader and some of those resources along the way. So we have our moments of introspection. Again, like I would encourage you to use those 5 questions. There's a gazillion more out there on the web that you could probably find as well, of like how do you self-assess yourself as a leader and probably even as a manager too. We didn't even dive into what are the questions you should be asking yourself of like, are you a good manager? There's certainly differences between being a good manager and a bad manager, and a good leader and a bad leader. And I'm trying to talk about some of those ideals today though. Start to think about like how are we fostering those relationships with our team. I really believe that the relationship aspect environment you create is really what drives the success that you'll have as a leader. Identify those characteristics that you're looking for in a leader, and then how do you make sure you're developing those within yourself. And then the strategies piece. Again, what are we doing to implement strategies to be a better leader? How are we iterating on those strategies? I gave you different strategies today, but those might not be that might not be your style, right? Like identify what is your style and implement those along the way, and make small tweaks and figure out what works in one scenario and what. So ready to move into questions. Otherwise, I can always jump back if there's anything before we want to move into questions.
Well, thank you, Jared. What we're going to do right now, just for a moment, is say goodbye to everybody on Facebook. So we're going to end the Facebook Live and we're going to open the Q&A session to our Power People members only. So let me disconnect Facebook. Thank you, everybody on Facebook. Okay, and so now we'll open the floor to questions.